Keep these two numbers in mind today, 16 and 17. 16 is the number of hours House impeachment managers have starting this afternoon to convince senators to try to find Donald Trump guilty of the impeachment charge against him. 17, of course, is the number of Republican senators they'll have to bring on board if all Democrats are unanimous to get a conviction. And our latest count here at NBC News shows House managers still have a pretty steep hill to climb to try to get the outcome they're looking for. We're joined now by a Republican senator who will be hearing those arguments, Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota. He voted yesterday to say the trial was unconstitutional. Senator, good morning. Thank you for being back on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You called the argument from House impeachment manager Jamie Raskin superior. You thought he actually did a better job making the case yesterday, and yet you still voted for the arguments presented by Bruce Castor, which have widely been decried as meandering and insufficient, even by people in your own party. How did you come to that conclusion that you still felt like this trial was unconstitutional? How do you explain that to people who wonder if you're just voting the way your party wants you to?
Sure. Thanks. Well, first of all, I do think Representative Raskin's description of it was superior. The performance was superior. They did a better job, a more organized presentation. However, remember, and you made the point of the steep hill, the hill's supposed to be steep. They're the ones that have the burden of proof on them. But Mr. Schoen, not Mr. Castor, but Mr. Schoen, in about the 90th minute, got to the point of why he believes and why I believe it's unconstitutional. And that is the plain reading of the Constitution, especially as it relates to, quote, the president, unquote. The president means the president, not a former president. It means the same thing in every article. The simplicity of that argument, I think the plain reading is what's compelling to me, but that doesn't diminish, of course, the excellent job, frankly, that the House managers did, not just in making the case, that they were trying to make yesterday. That is the constitutional question of jurisdiction of the Senate, but really laying the groundwork for what I think we're going to see a lot more of over the course of the next 2 days.
Which is the culpability question. So have you made a decision on that? Fine, that you don't think the trial is constitutional, but other senators do. The Senate will move forward under those rules. Have you prejudged the outcome? Are you still considered an undecided vote here when it relates to the conduct and to the culpability that we're talking about?
Yeah, so Hallie, this is really an important question for a juror, and realizing impeachment is a more political, or at least more political than a typical criminal or civil jury. But first of all, I never start with the presumption of guilt. And I think that's only appropriate given our Constitution, given our traditions. So I presume innocence. That being said, I do think that the hill is very steep. It's supposed to be steep. It's designed to be a steep hill. And, unless I'm convinced otherwise, I expect that the president he'll get my vote for acquittal, and he will get acquitted. That said, there's a reason why they have 16 hours to make their case, they being the House managers, and why, of course, the president's defense gets to rebut that.
You say the hill is very steep. What's at the top of that hill if it's not inciting an insurrection?
Well, I think your previous guest, by the way, which I wish now I would have listened to longer, because I thought he was doing a very good job explaining the standards, and it's the cause and effect, really. I think the managers are going to spend a lot of time, like they did last night, demonstrating that a really awful thing happened on January 6th. A lot of people did really awful things, and they need to be held to account for it. The question, though, that they have to answer for a conviction is, what's the president's level of culpability? And there's a standard for that. And, the inciting is, I think, a pretty long stretch from everything that I've seen to this point. That said, again, I'm going to listen attentively, take notes as I always do for 16 hours and see what the defense has to say in opposition.
Well, given your vote yesterday about the unconstitutionality of this trial, I do wonder if you worry about the precedent you're setting for a future president to do whatever they want in the last days of office when it's too late to impeach and then convict them.
Well, it may be too late to impeach, but it's not too late to convict. And I think that's the point. There is a judicial system, a criminal system for private citizens. And I would think that if they feel like they have a strong argument, that some U.S. attorney from the District of Columbia might be able to bring charges against the president, and then he'll have to defend himself again. And frankly, I think that's a better forum for the issue that we're dealing with, because remember, this was a very fast, really a snap impeachment. And then after which the Speaker of the House withheld the articles of impeachment, sent them over late in the president's term to the Senate. So, it's a much more political process. I think a much cleaner process would be in a criminal court if, in fact, they think that they have a case to be made. So it's not like he can't be convicted. I just think this is the wrong point. Plus, it has all the other political ramifications of a lack of unity and not dealing with other important things like confirming cabinet nominees and dealing with COVID-19 and defending the country.
Well, we should note that nothing has been held up in terms of addressing COVID-19. President Biden is going forward with his plan throughout the first 100 days. The impeachment trial isn't preventing any of that. I do want to ask, you have said previously that former President Trump bears some responsibility for ramping up the rhetoric. What does that look like? What are those consequences, if not impeachment?
Sure. Important point. First of all, remember, the president has already lost the election, so he's been removed from office, and this happened subsequent, obviously, to that. In terms of the responsibility he bears, it's interesting that the one thing that the Senate impeachment, a trial or a conviction could do is make sure that he can't ever run again or hold another office. But the reality is, given what's happened, there's probably a high likelihood he couldn't anyway. In fact, if I was a Democrat, I'd probably hope that he could, because I think it makes their chances perhaps better given their arguments. So to me, I think he's already receiving some of that punishment, but let's also remember that, as I said earlier, there is another way. The other thing I would say, though, about your point about nothing's being held up, it actually is being held up. I mean, for one week, the Senate cannot deal with anything. We cannot deal with anything other than this impeachment. So we're not going to have a vote on anything. We're not going to be able to vote on budget reconciliation. Nancy Pelosi sent the House home for another extra week. So, things are being held up and being delayed.
Rules that were negotiated by the Trump defense team too, Senator, of course. That's what everybody wanted.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that's not what everybody wanted. It's what they had to settle for. Then they agreed to the rules that that are governing this impeachment. But, the preference would be not to be wasting this week on this political action.
Except Mitch McConnell could have brought this to the Senate weeks ago and chose not to.
Well, actually, he had one day in which maybe it could have happened. It would have required a unanimous consent vote to bring the Senate back from its scheduled recess. There's no way you're going to get 100 senators to agree to that. He knows that. And so, no, he really couldn't have. And Nancy Pelosi could have sent the articles of impeachment over much sooner as well. And she chose not to do that. I think one of the relevant points that the defense team made yesterday, Mr. Schoen made the point that why did she wait? Was it, in fact, so that there wouldn't be the president, wouldn't be the person on trial, but a former president, which means that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court would not be presiding. Instead, you'd have, a partisan juror. And while he was doing a lot of gymnastics to make sure that he didn't personally offend Patrick Leahy, which I thought he did fine, and we all know Patrick Leahy to be a man of great integrity, it was rather interesting point, I think, that the delay might have had some strategic purpose.
Senator, you're making the argument that once a president leaves office, the only way that he can be convicted of any wrongs is criminal, which supposes that the things that he does are inherently criminal. I'll put that aside for now. But are you saying if the feds decide that the president should be put under trial for inciting an insurrection and they find him guilty, that you would support that decision?
Well, if the Fed would do that and the court system would do that and he would be found guilty, it wouldn't matter what I thought about it, which is really the relevant point here, is that there is a system of where due process would be allowed. One of the problems with this snap impeachment was that there wasn't an investigation. As the investigations are going on, we're finding more and more evidence that in fact this was planned long before this speech, that people were well prepared. I've talked to people who were there that say there was a lot of evidence of that at the time, actually. That was well coordinated. So this wasn't some sort of impulsive response to a rally or a great fire 'em up speech. It was, in fact, more planned out. So I just think that would be a better system of providing the due process that's required, and especially in something that's as serious as this.
Senator, we are out of time, so just very quickly, yes or no, would you support a censure then of the former president if this impeachment does not result in a conviction?
I would have considered that prior to this, but this isn't the route that the Democrats chose. As we can always count on, they went too far, they overreached, and I think that they're going to have to live with that. So no, I wouldn't at this point.
Senator Kevin Cramer, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.